Chapter 210. Fu Jiu sat on the sofa, still wearing her school uniform. She casually put one hand on the back of the sofa, looking devilishly handsome from head to toe. Who told you that I was worried about my mom knowing about my results? Chen Xiaodong's eyes lit up when he heard that. Did young master advance by 1 rank? That's great. What do you mean advance by 1 rank? He Honghua walked over with a round face. She couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. Our Jiu got first place in the whole grade. First, in the whole grade. Chen Xiaodong was petrified. The first place in the whole grade who got full marks in all 5 subjects was their young master. What on earth did young master eat to become so powerful all of a sudden? Could it be because of young master Qin? It was said that the power of love was great. He didn't believe it before, but now that he saw his young master, he believed everything. That young master who didn't even know how to touch a computer now locked himself in his bedroom and played games all day. Not only that, but there were also physics exercises. When did young master study so obediently? All these changes were because of young master Qin. For the sake of Madame's happiness, he would keep this secret to himself, but he Honghua wasn't worried about this. Instead, she asked, Jiu, I saw the registration on the website system. Where did your team come from? Do they all know how to play games? Of course. Fu Jiu chuckled. Mom, leave the competition to me. Just stay at home and rest. He Honghua thought that her Jiu's definition of how to play games was different from hers. She was talking about a professional. Even if he wasn't a professional, he would at least be a god. But as long as Jiu was happy, she could do whatever she wanted. He Honghua's biggest wish was to make her child happy, no matter what. At this moment, in a big hotel in the west of Jiang City, Fu Zhongyi specially held a small cocktail party to promote Fu Ximing. Other than the Fu family's business partners and school leaders, there were also Fu Ximing's friends from other teams. So naturally, the media would come after hearing the news. Young Master Fu, I heard that you are very confident about this esports selection contest. When the reporter was interviewing, he had a smile on his face. It was obvious that he was here to support Fu Ximing. Fu Ximing was wearing a pure white suit. His small face had a unique arrogance. Of course, I believe in my strength, and I believe in the strength of our team even more. The esports selection contest is just a beginner's competition. Of course, we will win. I believe that. The reporter said passionately, this time, the Fu Corporation has recruited quite a number of almighties into the team. Even young Master Fu himself is a famous almighty in the game. As for who it is, I can't say yet. But overall, this is definitely an esports competition worth looking forward to. Chapter 211. The school leader gave Fu Zhongyi enough face and said with a smile, Boss Fu, you really know how to educate your child. The results this time are so good that it's shocking. The school wanted to hold a parent-teacher conference, but we cancelled it because we were afraid that it would affect the students' studies. But Boss Fu, sometimes you should really go to the school and tell them how you raised your child. Fu Zhongyi heard that and thought that the school leader was praising his youngest son. His face became even more proud, but he still said modestly, you flatter me. Ximing has been sensible since he was young. Whether it's in games or studies, he has never let me down. This child is so capable that even I, as his father, have benefited from it. Who knew that when the school leader heard this, he froze in an instant. He cleared his throat awkwardly and said, well, Boss Fu, I was talking about your eldest son, Fu Jiu. Him. Fu Zhongyi's expression was blank for a moment. After all, he never expected that the other party would bring up that useless loser. When Fu Ximing heard the name Fu Jiu, he wanted to skin the other party's bones. He stood there and laughed arrogantly. So the director is talking about my big brother. Looks like my big brother is finally a little more sensible this time. He knows how to study. If the director is praising him like this, his results must be pretty good. He is in the bottom 20. The results will be announced tomorrow. But your big brother is much better than you think. The director's expression changed when he talked about Fuzhou. I've never seen such a smart student. He got full marks in all 5 subjects. I was the supervisor when he took the English exam, and he handed it in less than an hour. That English essay was so beautiful. As the top student in the whole grade, except for young Master Qin, he didn't surpass anyone else. Boss Fu, your eldest son is too low-key. Otherwise, he would have definitely become a popular figure in school. Even my daughter, who is in junior high, is crazy about him. She asks me to take her to see the latest school hunk every day. I don't know where these kids found this picture, but they said that they should look up to His Highness Joe in the future. Not only must they be handsome, but they must also have a good character. Speaking of which, my daughter really became a lot more sensible after that. Is this the legendary power of idols? Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. The director was a straightforward person. He laughed out loud at the end, and he didn't notice that Fu Zhongyi and Fu Ximing's faces turned green after hearing his words. Especially Fu Ximing. He clenched his fists, and his fingertips dug into his palms. He was clenching his fists tightly. The director's words really made him feel like someone had slapped him in the face. It was burning and embarrassing. Top student in the grade. That trash. How could it be? What power of idols? He knew better than anyone else what kind of a freak that was. He was a man himself, but when he saw someone taller and stronger than him, he couldn't move his eyes away. He would throw money around and show off his wealth. What right did such a good-for-nothing have to be a popular figure in the school? Fu Ximing narrowed his eyes. After the esports competition was over and King destroyed He Honghua's stupid company, he would come back and teach that blind piece of trash a lesson. The next day, as soon as the poster was announced, all the students in number 1 middle school gathered around. It's just that he's more low-key, unlike your Highness Joe, who just got a little better in the exam and still has to make it known everywhere. I just chuckle. Shui Yaoyao came to find Fuzhou today because she wanted His Highness Joe to take a look at the posts about her on the forum. It was supposed to be a happy thing, but she didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Even if the other party wanted to flatter Fu Ximing, there was no need to say such things about His Highness Joe, right? Her fingers moved angrily, and she was about to type a reply. Chapter 213. Shui Yaoyao looked up and stared blankly at the excessively handsome young man in front of her. Fuzhou chuckled and continued, "Don't forget, our goal is to dominate the entire selection contest." It was because of the young man's devilishly handsome attitude that made people's blood boil with excitement. In the beginning, she played hero because she wanted to find some friendliness and comfort in the game world that she couldn't find in real life. But now, she not only found it, but also learned to fight and be strong. This was a battlefield. If His Highness Joe was the king, then they were his loyal knights. Every one of us would tell ourselves that. If I were strong enough, I would face humiliation and ridicule, and I would say loudly, "No." This competition was not just a simple game. They had to fight for their dignity. Would tomorrow, when people found out about His Highness Joe and Spade Z's identity, they wouldn't look at her in such a strange way. The night before the competition, there were bound to be people who couldn't sleep well. Shui Yaoyao was the first. After she finished a math problem, she forced herself to go to bed early, but she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Finally, she sat up and started to study the technique Fuzhou taught her. Feng Shang was also in the same state. He sat in front of the computer, but he didn't play any games. He just looked at the game character on the screen, and then he glanced sideways at the place on the calendar that was heavily circled with a red circle. Being a professional player. That was something he didn't even dare to dream of before. Feng Shang lowered his head and clenched the mouse in his hand. Without his glasses, he was really too handsome. People were still playing games in the internet cafe, and Hero's page was hanging high up on the screen. Someone knocked on the counter. "Boss?" "Hi, boss. What are you doing?" "Give me a Coke." Yin Weiyao didn't say anything. With a cigarette in his mouth, he handed over the Coke. That person touched his chin and asked, "What's wrong with the boss today?" "I don't know. He looks different from usual, and I heard that the internet cafe will be locked at 10:30 today." "Damn. So early. I was going to pull an all-nighter. I've never seen an internet cafe that doesn't open at night. Our boss is so capricious." Yin Weiyao flicked the cigarette butt. "What are you talking about? Brats, pack up and get ready to close." "Are you really going to close the door?" "No, boss, uncle." "Where are you planning to go? Aren't you going to open the internet cafe?" Yin Weiyao paused, taking his jacket and flinging it over his shoulder. "Uncle, I'm going back to my old profession, playing in the professional league." Yin Weiyao walked out of the internet cafe after saying that, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. "Did you hear that? The boss said he was going to play in the professional league." Chapter 2:14. This reminded Yin Weiyao of the earliest times when he played Hero. At that time, many people who played games were not understood. It wasn't like now, where a great god would be sought after by everyone. In the past 6 years, in the eyes of most people, anyone who had anything to do with computers was a loafer. Esports would always be rejected in China. Therefore, whether it was his relatives or classmates, the first thing they saw when they mentioned that he worked in the game industry was subtle disdain. Playing games can also earn money. Spending money is more like it. Such a person is a glutton and lazy person. He won't have much success in the future. Yin Weiyao sat on the railing outside the internet cafe, cocking his head and lighting a cigarette. Even he himself did not understand why he would think of something so long ago today. How many people say, he is not practical. He gritted his teeth and persevered. He thought that one day, he would prove to everyone that what he was doing was called esports and not just a game. Finally, he entered a pro team. He thought that he could finally shine. However, in just half a year, in the short span of half a year, all of his passion for this industry had been obliterated. It turned out that you didn't have to play the game well to make a name for yourself. How to promote, whether or not your agent will support you, the competition between people in the same industry, and the betrayal of your closest comrades in order to steal fans. Yin Weiyao stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. Just as he was about to enter, his phone screen lit up. It was a message from their temporary team's WeChat group. 999 brand lollipop, can't you all sleep? Come out, I have gifts for you. What a child, a high school student. Yin Weiyao snorted, but his lips curled into a smile. With a cigarette in his mouth, he put on his hat and ran towards the address that the youth had sent to the group. There weren't many cars on the road at night. Especially in the north, like Rivertown, the colder it was, the fewer people there were. However, for some reason, his chest and palms were burning hot. Feng Shang put on his coat and left. Shui Yaoyao also left at the same time. It was as if no matter how dark or cold it was outside, at that moment, even their eyes were bright. And what attracted them was the young man standing in the empty square of Chang'an Street. That tall and slender, his back straight and wearing a black leather jacket and short silver hair, he leaned against a pure black Land Rover. After 11 o'clock in the evening, there were not so many cars on Chang'an Street. Therefore, even the sound of breathing while running could be heard clearly. Shui Yaoyao took the last train while Feng Shang drove and Yin Weiyao took a taxi. The three of them came from the north, south and east respectively. He didn't know if it was because he was running too fast, or because of the figure that emitted light even under the night sky. His heart was beating so fast that it felt a little tight. That kind of feeling didn't only occur when one was in love or missing someone. And it was now that they saw their companions and smiled at each other. Fu Jiu smiled as well. She walked over from the other side and raised her hand. The trunk and car lights were turned on at the same time. Under the dazzling light, all the rose petals that were pressed against the back of the car gushed out, just like a scene from a comic. Both Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang were stunned when they saw this. It seemed to be the most beautiful scene they had ever seen. Chapter 2:15. Team Uniform. Shui Yaoyao never thought that His Highness Jiu would give them this as a gift. When she turned her head to look, even the handsome Uncle Yin Weyao's eyes changed when he saw the uniform in his hands. Needless to say, Feng Shang's fingers trembled when he touched the fabric in his hands. He had seen too many players trained by his brother. Every time he watched a professional league match, he would think that those people were so handsome when they sat in front of the computer in their uniforms, typing on the keyboard, and waving the mouse. If he didn't stutter, his life might not be like this. But it was inevitable that he felt inferior. In fact, before he met his idol, he was afraid to communicate with others. When Feng Shang thought of this, he raised his eyes and looked at the smiling young man with his hands in his trouser pockets. Fu Jiu looked back at him. She raised her hand and put on the uniform that belonged to her. The quality of the uniform was very good, and it was obviously custom-made. The smooth lines slid down the shoulders, and with that handsome and fair face, she looked cool and noble. Shui Yaoyao and Yin Weiyao looked at each other and pulled up the zipper. 4 people of different heights, all wearing the same uniform, stood in the middle of the square. Their feet stepped on the car lights, and the rose petals didn't fall for a long time. The next day, all kinds of news about the selection contest swept across the internet. Even if there was no news, there was still some news. After all, this was the most anticipated competition for everyone who played hero. People who didn't play games wouldn't understand what it meant to change from a non-professional player to a professional player. What's more, the person standing on the top floor waiting for the new contestants was none other than the most valuable professional player in the esports world, Qin Mo. Just hearing his name could make people's blood boil. Not to mention that almighty Qin would be on camera the whole time. In the words of the media, this was the era of all-stars. The popularity of a professional team was no less than that of some actors, and it could even create an extraordinary amount of discussion. One of the live streaming platforms had already broken 10 million online users in the morning. Each of them had their own team that they supported, and the big clubs had sent out messages in advance about who would participate in the competition. On this day, the internet cafe was unusually quiet. Everyone was holding a beer or Coke, looking up at the big screen in front of them. The tickets for the selection contest had been on sale since a week ago, and the price was getting more and more expensive day by day. Until today, there were still people who wanted to buy tickets. The reason why these people were like this was because they were all waiting for the same scene, the members of the various battle teams entering the arena. Such a grand competition guaranteed absolute viewership ratings. The media had already picked up their cameras, and the staff at the venue were making hand signals. In the middle of the venue, there were rows of computers. They were all made of top-notch equipment, and even the headphones hanging on them were black in color. The scene was no less than a star-studded movie. Sound engineer in position. Lighting technician in position. Commentator in position. Okay, all teams get ready. The countdown begins. The chief director of the competition, dressed in a black cotton-padded jacket, stood in the darkest corner, holding a loudspeaker in his hand. 3. When the director shouted, 2, Fujo, who was standing in the tunnel on the far right, tilted her head. Her side profile was handsome, and her gaze was cool. Are you ready? The three nodded in unison. Honghua glanced at the entrance of the passageway again and finally set her eyes on the young man who had caught everyone's attention the moment he appeared. Although Honghua knew that they were just fooling around, she still couldn't help but clench her fists and whisper, "Joe, you can do it." He hoped that these children could win. Even if they could only win one match, at least they wouldn't have any regrets. On the screen was a player named North of Ean Mountain, one of the top 5 players in the country. That's right, top 5. People who just started playing Hero might not recognize this name. But all the veteran players who had played for 3 years wanted to take another look at the screen in the middle of the game. After confirming that there was no mistake, the venue fell silent for a second, followed by a shout that came from the chest, Peking University. It really was Peking University. Damn, what should I do? My eyes are red. My favorite pro player is back. Luckily, I didn't give up. I knew that Peking University would definitely come back. Chapter 219. As such an unexpected name suddenly popped out, the reporters at the scene were momentarily stunned. Fu Shiming and the others didn't know what happened. North of Ean Mountain. Who was that? At this time, it was time for the commentator to come on. The commentator usually played Hero professionally, so of course he was good at crowd control. I'm sure everyone is curious about who North of Ean Mountain is. 5 years ago, when Hero wasn't as popular as it was now, a cute kid like me clicked open a video of a national ranking tournament. I still remember that ranking tournament to this day. It was because I saw that person play that I decided to become a professional gamer. That person was none other than North of Ean Mountain. But later, for some unknown reason, Peking University left the esports scene, and the name, North of the Mountain Ean, never lit up again. I believe that there are many people who feel the same way as me. The one we've been waiting for has finally returned. At the end, the commentator's voice was a bit hoarse. At that moment, some of the people in front of their computers froze. They were not the only ones whose eyes had turned red because of a name. They had only occasionally thought of watching another league match, but their eyes had turned red because of one name. In this world, there will always be such a person. On him, all the memories of your youth are recorded. Even if you get married, have children, and gradually become one of the many people in the world. But when you see that person, you will remember the past that made your blood boil and your eyes light up. North of Ean Mountain. That's the kind of person. The crowd was almost out of control. Fortunately, the other commentator joined the industry late. He wiped his partner's face and turned his head to the microphone. He's crying. What should we do? F***CK, I'm not crying. You say you're not crying. Your eyes are red like a rabbit's. Who arranged for you to commentate with me? Didn't you say that since we play together and commentate together, I'm actually in a difficult position? Shut up. Then don't cry. I'll buy you some candy. Listening to those words, not only did the director want to hold his forehead, but even manager Feng dragged his assistant over. Who let them go on stage to explain? Feng, CEO Feng, have you forgotten? You said that the two of them look like a couple. Now, the audience likes to watch them bicker. The most important thing is that the two of them appear together. The click rate is high. Manager Feng took a deep breath. Tell them to leave their love for each other at home. What's important now is... Who is North of Ean Mountain? Just now, all the cameras were aimed at Fu Ximing's team. They were waiting for them to reveal something, so they didn't move their cameras. Now that he thought about it, the explosion seemed to have come from the west. In other words, he had only heard the sound and did not see who logged in with the name north of Yin Mountain. Fortunately, there were technicians. With a single adjustment, they locked onto the positions of the battle team members who had logged in. Number 31, He Family Army, Yin Wuyao. He Family Army. How could this be? Chapter 220. Qin Xiaodong was also shocked, and the shocked expression on his face was very obvious. So the person young master found, was this good? The people on Fu Ximing's side all opened their eyes wide. They never thought that there would be such a person in that wild army. Fu Ximing's expression changed, and then he said casually, "There's nothing strange about this. It's normal for He Honghua to spend money to find a master to shock the scene. As for the others, how can they be so good if they play with Fuzhou?" However, just as Fu Ximing finished speaking, another light exploded on the He family army's side. Awarding you a slap of pleasure, popular player, Glory Zone C, ranked top 7 in the country. Anyone who played Hero would know this ID. This person was not only well equipped, but he was also a top-notch almighty in ranked matches. Almost in an instant, the sound of discussion swept through the entire arena like a tide. Holy **T. Who the hell is this He family army? This player's ranking is too amazing. More than amazing, they're practically poaching the entire almighty in the hero ranking. To be honest, I thought they were just a small amateur team. I didn't expect them to be so good. How come they didn't even dig up their background? Why didn't they even dig out their background? The media friends were almost crying, okay. Our friends from the media are also close to crying, alright. How could they have imagined that a temporary team that should not have appeared in front of the cameras would be able to shock the entire audience? Someone was even yelling, "Follow Big Brother, I'll beat you and take you to the skies." These words were all for Feng Shang. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. After all, they sometimes played ranked matches in the game, and they had fought against each other before. The other's skills and dialogue were too different from his. Wasn't this the real cuteness? Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. His left hand, which was about to give out orders, suddenly stopped. This scene was something that almost no one had expected. First, the Almighty who disappeared 5 years ago came back. Then, it was the RMB Almighty on the super popular rankings. Both of them were from the same team, the He family army. This was a team that no one present had ever heard of before. However, the two people were indeed sitting there, and the computer screen was still emitting a faint blue light, which proved that this matter was true. Chapter 221. H.E.I. Black. Her fair hands were on the keyboard, and her fingers moved at a surprisingly fast speed. Together with the handsome and evil silver hair of the young man, he was unspeakably cool. Before people could see how the young man was typing, 3 big words appeared on the big screen in the center, Spade Z. Instantly, He Honghua choked. Her mouth was wide open, and she couldn't say a word. She stared blankly at the scene in front of her, and even her black pupils were shocked. Qin Xiaodong's reaction was even more direct, and the support stick in his hand fell to the ground. Spade. Spade Z. His young master was Spade Z. That great god Spade Z who wiped out the whole server. How could this be? Young master was clearly a gamer who didn't even know how to choose a character. Although young master had been working hard recently to chase after young master Qin, locking himself in his room every day to play hero. But how could he be Spade Z? Chen Xiaodong glanced at the silver-haired young man sitting in front of the computer again, and even his fingers began to tremble. He couldn't tell what he was feeling at that moment. Excitement, shock, or disbelief. He couldn't believe it, but the audience gave the most direct reaction. Swoosh! Everyone in the audience stood up. Not only that, but the number of clicks on the online platform soared to the highest point because of the appearance of this game ID. The noise in the internet cafe almost blew the roof off. Everyone clenched the can of cola in their hands, and their eyes were shaking as they looked at the screen. Spade Z. That was Spade Z. Because the reaction was too big, the recorder had to stand up to maintain order. Quiet down, the game account hasn't been logged in yet, everyone quiet down. How could they be quiet? That was their Big Spade. The rookie king Big Spade who swept the FC in Zone C. In fact, they didn't have much hope for the appearance of their Prince Charming. The media also said that the reason why Spade Z was so mysterious was probably because he was ugly and unpresentable. Those words weren't very nice. But now, just by looking at that face, passers-by would become his fans. Too handsome. Too young. Especially when the lollipop was in her mouth and her eyes were lowered as she typed, her thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under her eyelids. His messy silver hair matched with his black and white combat uniform didn't make him look decadent. Instead, he looked impeccably handsome. Ostentatious, arrogant, and noble. It was as if he could wipe out an entire army with a single move. This was simply making people's blood boil. Was that their Adonis, Spade Z? Everyone held their breath. The cameras were all aimed at the youngster's face. However, there was a beep. Game account login failed. There was only one sentence on the screen: your account or password is incorrect. This news was like a bucket of cold water, extinguishing everyone's enthusiasm. The amazement from before quickly faded from the audience's faces. It wasn't just the people in the stands, even the commentator couldn't hide the astonishment in his eyes. Login failed. What was going on? Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang, who were already sitting in front of the computer, also turned around abruptly and looked at the young man's side profile. Chapter 222. Just when everyone was in a daze, a sneer suddenly came from the Fu family battle team. Huh, what are they doing? Someone even dared to impersonate Spade Z just to attract attention. Aren't you afraid of being kicked out? Impersonate. These two words were like a tornado that engulfed the entire esports arena. The audience did not want such a thing to happen. Especially the haters, but if it wasn't an impersonation, then how could they explain the fact that the youngster couldn't log into the account? For a moment, everyone looked at Fu Jiu differently. From the excitement just now to the suspicion now, there were even traces of disgust in the eyes of some people. Feng Shang panicked. You, don't talk nonsense. The captain is Spade Z. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. There's actually a stutter here. The people from the Fu family battle team didn't even bother to hide their laughter. Reward you with a punch of consumer delight. I didn't expect you to be like this in real life. How poor was the He family that they had to find a little stutterer to compete? Feng Shang didn't mind hearing those words, but when manager Feng heard those words, he wanted to drag the speaker over through the glass and teach him a lesson. But before he could move, a loud bang was heard. The silver-haired youngster, who had been sitting in front of the computer, kicked his chair away. With one hand in his pocket, he stared coldly at the members of the Fu family and smiled evilly. Who are you calling a stutterer? What right does a person who betrayed his master have to bark? The young man's voice was very pleasant. It was slow and magnetic, and it grabbed everyone's ears as soon as he opened his mouth. After hearing Fu Jiu's words, the man's entire face turned red. He clenched his fists and wanted to say something more. Fu Ximing stretched out his hand to stop him. His face was full of arrogance. There's no need to talk nonsense with someone who wants to impersonate me. Trying to impersonate him. Soon, someone caught the main point of Fu Ximing's words, and an uproar broke out again. What does young Master Fu mean? Could he be the real Spade Z? Thinking about it, the possibility of young Master Fu being Spade Z is very high. Hadn't the media previously reported that he had been internally selected by the Qin Corporation Club? Such a guess seemed to have been confirmed. Everyone began to look at each other in dismay. The audience's perception immediately leaned towards Fu Ximing's side. If that's the case, then Fu Jiu is really shameless. You're shameless to the extreme, okay? Who could impersonate our big Spade so easily? Shui Yaoyao looked at the condemning gazes directed at the youngster, which made her feel extremely uneasy. The saddest thing in the world was to be impersonated, and you still couldn't prove it was you. Chapter 223. At this time, Fu Ximing was already sitting in front of his computer. With a click of his finger, he logged in and entered the game page directly. The light turned red. The record holder of 99 first kills. The first place in the ranking competition. The game ID that had countless glory appeared in front of everyone just like that. Spade Z. The audience shouted this name in unison. Their chests shook with unspeakable excitement. Fu Ximing curled up the corner of his lips in the cheers of the audience. What his mother said was right. The game ID Spade Z was worth spending a lot of money to hire someone to get it. But he really didn't expect that trash to be Spade Z. When Fu Jiu logged in with this game ID just now, he was a little uneasy until someone suggested impersonating him. Then he had a sudden inspiration and came up with such a good idea. In the world of online games, whoever could log in with an ID was the real one. Fu Ximing stood up and glanced at Fu Jiu coldly. When he bought the account, he didn't like this Spade Z. It turned out that there was a reason for his dislike. But now, he was going to use this game ID to completely ruin the He family army's reputation. What could Fu Jiu do? She could only be anxious. He. The smile on Fu Ximing's face became wider. Old gamers like Feng Shang and Yin Weiyao knew at a glance that their captain's account had been tricked. Motherf ****. Yin Weiyao couldn't help but curse. He left the circle because of the unknown darkness. He didn't expect that when he came back, he would encounter such a disgusting thing right at the beginning. What should he do now? Little Captain was the one who suffered the most, right? Yin Weiyao always said that Fu Jiu was a high school student, like an uncle. But now, he really felt sorry for her. How could he not feel sorry? Those who knew Fu Jiu were all annoyed. Just when the second wave of sarcasm was about to come, they heard a bang. The door that originally led to the top floor was kicked open by someone. Qin Mo, who was wearing a pure black uniform, suddenly appeared at the door. His long legs were straight, and his side profile was so handsome that he seemed to have walked out of a manga. Standing behind him was Secretary Liang, who was panting heavily. He called out worriedly, CEO Qin. This is still a live broadcast. Even if you can't stand others bullying young Master Jiu, you can't be impulsive. The audience fell into silence the moment Qin Mo appeared. Because no one expected Almighty Qin to come down. Although Chin Mo didn't say anything, the corner of his mouth curved coldly, and there was a strong chill in his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he threw the uniform into Secretary Liang's hand. It was obvious that he was going to do it himself. However, Fu Jiu looked back at him with a deep gaze. She just looked at him quietly. Chin Mo stopped in his tracks. The two equally handsome men stared at each other as if no one else was around. Apart from his handsomeness, there were also invisible sparks colliding. No one could understand the twists and turns within. But Chin Mo understood what the youngster meant. He wanted to do it himself. For this, Chin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fu Jiu smiled as well. She touched her thin lips with her fingertips, and her left eye winked seductively. Chapter 224. Seeing that Almighty Chin went back, everyone was confused. What was going on? Logically speaking, Almighty Chin should have kicked whoever pretended to be Spade Z out. Why did he go back? Even Secretary Liang was a bit confused. Just now, CEO Chin's cold aura could almost freeze people's hearts. How come it seemed to have faded away so much? No, that's not right. Rather than saying it faded away, it was more like CEO Chin had suppressed the hostility in his eyes. Secretary Liang didn't think it was a good sign. Usually, the more silent CEO Chin was, the uglier he would die in the end. But what made Secretary Liang feel strange was that CEO Chin still had the patience to stand there and wait. The audience was puzzled as well. They turned to look at the esports arena again. In the midst of all the noise, that young man sat back in front of his computer calmly. His side profile was handsome and indifferent, as if he wasn't the one being despised. Fu Jiu moved her slender fingers and twisted the black microphone on the side. She put it in front of her lips, and her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. Then, she laughed in a low voice. I didn't expect that my account would be hacked after a few days of not playing. But it doesn't matter. There is a good way to prove who is the real one. While she was talking, her hands were still typing on the keyboard. It was a real blind typing, and her fingers were so beautiful that people gasped. Damn! This person's hands are so fast. The commentator said this, and it wasn't hard to hear the amazement on his face. But it wasn't over yet. As Fu Jiu's fingertips fell, the screen in front of her fell into darkness. Apart from a series of white codes, there was nothing else. What is this? Some people were shocked, and they couldn't believe what they saw. It's a network attack. He is doing a network attack on the spot. This is the first time I've seen a real network attack. It's so cool. Network attack. What do you mean? You don't even know this. He is hacking the official website of Hero. Wait a minute. It seems that not only the official website of Hero, but also the live streaming platform is under his control. Holy sh*t. That was way too awesome. Even if this person isn't Spade Z, I will still be his fan. This hacking skill is simply out of this world. Hacking skills. Are you saying that this person is a hacker? F***ck, brother, look at the code. What's that jumping on the screen? Have some common sense. How can a hacker do this? No matter how excited the crowd was, Fu Jiu's sitting posture was still very calm. She was still sucking on the lollipop, but it didn't affect her evil and cold voice at all. Everyone leaves their real information when they create an account. Although my information is hidden through special means, and no one can find out, even the officials can't see it. But all they need to do is touch the hidden data here, and everything will be revealed. The infiltration process was extremely fast. Before anyone could react, the young man had already pressed the enter key. The beautiful finger technique came to a screeching halt. The rhythmic clattering of the keyboard could no longer be heard on the court. Chapter 225. It was Fu Zhou, not Fu Ximing. In an instant, everyone held their breath. Seeing this, those fans who claimed to love Spade Z and scolded Fu Zhou shut up. Instead, some people who didn't say anything just now suddenly shouted, "My big spade is so handsome." This was a direct acknowledgement of Fu Zhou's identity. In fact, the audience who really liked Spade Z kept a low profile from the moment they entered the arena. They never believed that Fu Ximing was Big Spade. After all, they all remembered their idol's words. Big Spade had said that he would join the He group when he killed someone with one move in the last live broadcast. But the public opinion was distorted by some reports, which made people think that Fu Ximing might be Spade Z. They didn't understand why some fans didn't listen to their idol and believed in some baseless analysis. "Are you sure you're a fan and not a hater?" The support was very powerful. Just one sentence was followed by a large number of whistles. Fu Ximing didn't expect things to turn out like this. Attacking the official website on the spot and retrieving the registration information. He still felt that everything was a nightmare. Fu Zhou, that sick loser, how could she be so powerful? Not to mention Fu Ximing's reaction, even Feng Shang and Yin Weiyao didn't know that their captain could do this. Hacker. Such a mysterious profession wasn't even close to reality. Chen Xiaodong couldn't believe it. Their family's young master, who only cared about men, was actually a hacker. He Honghua's eyes were so shocked that she couldn't control herself. Her Zhou. That was her Zhou. In the midst of all the noise, Fu Zhou stood up with one hand in her trouser pocket. Her posture was very cool. She looked at the Fu family team over there and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Just 3 words, but Fu Ximing's face turned pale. Even his lips lost their usual arrogance. The word embarrassment wasn't enough to describe his expression. But the camera was pointed at him, and everyone in the audience saw the embarrassment on his face. They thought that this was the end of the matter. But those fans who claimed to love Spade Z felt that Fu Zhou's actions were not only a slap to Fu Ximing's face, but also to their faces. They started to make a fuss. "Since you are a hacker, surely you can tamper with the official registration information." She wanted to prove that she was Spade Z with just a form. "Hee, do you think we're that easy to fool?" The real Spade fans almost had high blood pressure. "Let me ask, do you really like Big Spade?" "Not here to defame him. We want the truth." When the self-proclaimed fan said this, he felt like a little angel of justice. Nothing else. Fu Ximing saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better, and his artificial voice rang out again. "In this day and age, if you're a hacker, you can even turn black into white." Spade fans couldn't stand his attitude. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to beat him up. At the same time, "I'll pack up all those fake fans and throw them out through the window." Those comments stung my ears. Where was his intelligence? But at this moment, Fu Zhou laughed. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be dyed with endless black mist. "Fu Ximing, why are you in such a hurry? I didn't ask you to return the account." Chapter 226. Using a new account to compete. The referees looked at each other in shock. For so many years, no one had ever used a new account in the esports selection contest. There were too many limitations of a new account. After all, the top-level equipment in the game could only be used after reaching a certain level. Was this player planning to play in the ranking game without any equipment? But even so, there was no such rule in the rules. Because of the special situation, the referees had to look at the director's room, intending to talk to Manager Feng. Qin Mo's magnetic and deep voice sounded like a bottle of expensive red wine that had just been opened, exuding his unique grace. Let him use it. Being a man of few words was always in line with Almighty Qin's style. But the shoutcasters who knew their captain well felt their backs tighten. It seemed like their captain had never spoken up for anyone before. The two shoutcasters, who felt like they were spying on something, looked at each other, and without waiting for the referees to respond, they immediately said, "Okay, now let this player Fu Jiu apply for a new account and get ready for the first match." It was a very straightforward opening match. A live broadcast needed to constantly generate topics, and it couldn't slow down the pace. Every team sat back in front of their computers. Which team would PK with which team in the ranking game was random. They thought it was just a competition, but because of the identity of Spade Z, there was another topic to talk about. The big screen locked onto the list of the first duel. In this match, Fu Shiming and Fu Jiu didn't fight each other. Instead, the group of people who admired Fu Shiming wanted to PK with the He family army. "Young Master Fu, let's go first. We'll help you teach this reckless kid a lesson. That little stutterer and a has-been player are just a little bit better on the ranking list. What can they do? Using a new account and still daring to compete." That person sneered. His eyes fell back on the computer screen, and he typed rapidly to his teammates, "The new account is their weakness. Destroy them all." "Yes. Understood." The game screen officially turned on. Fu Jiu put on her headphones with her fingers. Her fingers weren't on the keyboard, but she used one hand to move the mouse. The other team thought that a new account with no attack power would be taken down quickly. Who knew that when they all approached the game ID 9? Awarding you a slap of pleasure, and North of Een Mountain appeared out of nowhere and used their ultimate skills at the same time. Silver light exploded, and the team was instantly wiped out. It hadn't even been a minute since the battle started. There were still two people on the He family army side who hadn't made a move, but the health of the person on the other side was already empty. Was there still a need to fight? The opponent's captain struggled to stand up. Een Shan Yi Bei turned around and used up the last drop of his pen. Not only was the game being synchronized on the screen, but it was also synchronized with the person playing the game. That beautiful hand speed and counterattack was simply amazing. A has-been god. Little stutterer. "Ha, I'll kill you." Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang had never had such tacit understanding before. They typed the same sentence at the same time. A gale of praises rang out in the arena. Chapter 227. Feng Shang was about to vomit blood when he heard that. He was never angry, but his face turned cold. "I can't accept your love." This was the first time he broke through his psychological barrier and shouted so loudly in public. Fu Jiu tilted her head and glanced at him. Feng Shang thought that his idol was going to praise him, and he blushed. Unexpectedly, his idol patted him on the shoulder and smiled handsomely. "So anger can cure stuttering. Feng Shang, okay, get ready for the second round." Under Fu Jiu's command, the He family army entered the game page. Fu Jiu only moved around for the whole 3 rounds of ranking PK. But was it really as simple as it looked? Anyone who had played the game before would know that the most difficult part of the game was the details. How to move around without being swept by others, and how to move around without affecting the teammates' performance. Only a master could do that. The commentators were all professional players of the Qin Corporation. From what they saw, they could tell that Fu Jiu was not a player who only knew how to leech experience. On the contrary, that young man didn't make a move, but once he made a move, even they couldn't be sure how good he was. But some fans were so arrogant that they firmly believed that Fu Jiu was only here to leech experience. After 1 round, there were only 4 teams left. Finally, a line of words appeared on the screen. He Family Army PK Fu Corporation Team. The members of the Fu family were indeed very good. After all, they had received professional training. No matter how amazing Fu Zhou's hacking skills were, they couldn't believe that the opponent was good at playing games. After all, they had been in the He Corporation for a long time. How could they not know what Fu Zhou was like? And even if the opponent really knew how to play games, how could he beat them with a new account? They were not like the previous teams, who had been hiding their skills for so long. It was not a problem to control the north of Yin Mountain. Captain. Someone typed to Fu Ximing. From the beginning, all the attacks were initiated by the north of Yin Mountain. Should we focus on him? Fu Ximing controlled the account of Spade Z and sent back and forth. I'll block, you guys cooperate. Pay attention to defense. Awarding you a slap of pleasure. Understood. Such a setup clearly showed that they didn't care about Fu Zhou's new account. They didn't even care about Shui Yaoyao. Fu Ximing had bought a lot of top-notch equipment for today's rookie selection contest. He raised his long saber and rushed in the direction of north of Yin Mountain. Their plan was to kill north of Yin Mountain, then turn around and give awarding you a slap pleasure a stunning skill. Because once they made their move, the first person to save north of Yin Mountain was definitely awarding you a slap of pleasure. Someone else. In the He family army, other than these two who were worth dealing with, the other two only knew how to move slowly. There was simply no need to guard against them. Yin Wuyao had also seen through his opponent's plan, and he immediately went into full defensive mode. You think you can stop me? Fu Ximing coldly laughed. Admit it, north of the Yin Mountain. You are already past your prime. You are just an old pro player who has lost all value. Even if you participate in the competition again, what can you do? Yin Wuyao had to admit, when he heard this, he did pause for a moment. Chapter 228. There was a clicking sound. A rhythmic tapping sound rose up. A clear and cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Yao Yao, replenish Uncle Yin's blood. Yes. Shui Yao Yao's cooperation was also very good. This girl who was ignored by everyone tilted her mouse and released the potion in time. Fu Zhou's voice was still there. Feng Shang, assist me. Yes. This meant that Fu Zhou was not only controlling her own character, but she was also controlling the overall situation of the battle. Fu Ximing's people saw this and wanted to go back to deal with Shui Yaoyao. After all, if she healed north of Yin Mountain, the HP they just lost would come back. Who knew that before he could move his feet, a figure appeared in front of him. With the Zhou symbol on it, the white robe spread out, and it was as if the wind itself had arrived. The speed at which he rushed up was too fast. Really too fast. That person didn't even see clearly who the person in front of him was. Fu Zhou's slender hands danced on the black keyboard. With beautiful positioning and operation, a killing critical hit. The dazzling silver light filled the entire screen in an instant, creating a magnificent scene. That person who wanted to go back to defend saw his HP drop to the freezing point. He didn't even have the chance to heal himself before he fell down heavily. People who died in ranked matches couldn't be revived. That person looked at the black screen in front of him, threw the mouse in his hand, and arched his long legs forward unwillingly. How did he get hit just like that? However, to everyone's surprise, the young man's attack wasn't over yet. On the screen, when the silver light was about to end, Fu Zhou waved the mouse in her hand and turned back to bite the incoming character. She did another absolute sweep. Holy **T. Yunhu, did you see that? His hands didn't even stop. The shoutcaster was so excited that he grabbed the arm of his friend next to him. The other shoutcaster, Yunhu, surprisingly didn't refute him. He looked at the screen in front of him seriously. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. There's more. There's more. This is unheard of. Fujio had pure black headphones on her silver hair. Her eyes didn't even look at the keyboard. She only stared at the screen, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her left hand was on the keyboard, and her right hand was on the mouse. Generally speaking, the speed of an ordinary person's left hand would not be very fast. But to her, it made no difference whether she used her left hand or right hand. This was also the reason for this unprecedented chain of critical hits. Fu Ximing had no idea what was going on. He only saw a flash of silver light, and his HP dropped by more than half. He didn't expect to be greeted by another wave of silver light before he could even move. He manipulated Spade Z's account, but he didn't even lift his hand. There was a loud bang. Critical strike. Dominating the entire field. The silver light fell. Less than a minute after the start, 2 large words appeared on the screen. KO. Fujio was still smiling, devilish, handsome, and unruly. However, it was already over. From the moment Fujio put her hand on the keyboard, the ending was decided. The shock never stopped. The entire audience stared blankly at this scene. Not only in the live stream, but even the players in front of their screens were stunned. Their eyes and hearts were numb. Chapter 229. Such a scene seemed to be very familiar. The youngster didn't bring any equipment, and even used a new account, but he could destroy the entire team with one move. Looking at the past 10 years of competitions, only Almighty Qin could do that. This not only tested the player's skills, but also required the player to have a clear strategic layout in his mind. Almighty Qin was known as the most valuable professional player precisely because he had this kind of ability to control the entire field. Now, there was this kind of amazing scene. And it was done by a newbie. This was enough to shock everyone. In fact, even Yin Weiyao didn't expect their team leader to be this good. He looked at the silver light and the 2 characters that represented a complete victory on the screen. At that moment, the youngster's words came to Yin Weiao's mind again. How is it enough to win an award? If you don't shock the esports world, why bother playing games? This time, not only the esports world of Jiang City was shocked, but even in the whole country, this kind of skill was top-notch. Especially that last roundhouse that showed how elegant it was to hit the enemy. It was really cool. Those anti-fans who were not convinced were all dumbfounded. That kind of technique was obviously Spade Z's most commonly used counterattack in dungeons. A person's identity could be faked, but the characteristics of this person's character couldn't be erased. And there were people who studied Spade Z's fighting style. If one didn't have a certain level of hand speed, they couldn't imitate it at all. They didn't know how to describe their inner feelings. They only felt the pain on their faces, and that kind of awkwardness was indescribable. Fu Ximing was in a daze the whole time. He was still looking at the screen where the silver light hadn't faded. He couldn't believe that they had been wiped out. Usually, every classic move of the winning side would be replayed on the big screen. This was something that happened in every single competition. However, only this time, when the ultimate move was replayed, even the commentator didn't come back to his senses. He just sat there with his eyes wide open. Whoosh! The whole stadium was filled with whistles. Many people stood up directly, waving their arms and hitting their support sticks loudly. Fu Ximing's face was unprecedentedly pale, without a trace of blood. He was still logged into his Spade Z account on the screen. That gray screen with this ID was very glaring. Everyone knew that a large part of the reason why Spade Z was liked by so many people was because he had never lost in the game. 99 consecutive wins, and as long as he played, he would get the first kill. And it was because of this record that he was so popular. But now, this godly ID with countless glory was in Fu Ximing's hands, and he didn't even have the power to fight back. In the end, it was already clear who was the real one. But it wasn't over yet. Chapter 230. After hearing this sentence, the uproar at the scene almost exploded. The number of clicks on all major online platforms broke 100 million. Everyone was leaving comments in the comments section. Even the platform technicians had never seen such a fast rate of comments. They were even worried that the network would go down. Cool. This is my big spade. I can KO you with a new account. I won't talk if I can do it. Where's the commentator? Play the replay and explain. The commentator has also become my big spades fangirl. I just want to ask you, who else is there? Who else is there? Open your eyes wide, those who are slandering my big spade. I've been waiting in front of the computer for a long time. As a middle-aged uncle, let me give you a scientific explanation. Only my big spade's hand speed can turn around and bite you. Do you understand? Fu Ximing, return my big spade's account. If you don't return it, I'll show you the strength of us hackers. These comments would appear on the live screen at the same time for better interaction online and offline. When the audience saw this, they were all very excited. Middle-aged uncle also likes my big spade. My big spade likes both men and women. He said they are hackers, I don't care. Anyway, return our big spade's account. Return it. In an instant, all the Spade fans in the audience were asking Fu Ximing to return the account. The Fu family's team couldn't even sit still when they were in such an embarrassing situation. Fu Ximing himself clenched his fists, and his face turned white and then purple. How could the media let go of such a scene? Of course, they would capture it immediately. Fu Ximing hurriedly used his hands to block, but the more he did so, the more embarrassing the scene became. Can't you have some manners? Why did you let him return the account to you? Some anti-fans couldn't accept this result. Because once they admitted that Fu Jiu was Spade Z, their words would become knives stabbing themselves. They still wanted to quibble, but as soon as they opened their mouths, they were suppressed. Shut up. Return the account. Don't think that a true Spade fan is easy to bully. When it's time to be tough, you won't be careless. One more word and I'll throw you out. But at this moment, Fu Jiu looked towards the audience and laughed. Her seductive skills and voice made people feel like they were in their bones. I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. As she spoke, her finger moved, and an invisible dialog box appeared on the computer screen. She pressed the enter key. The machine in front of Fu Ximing seemed to be controlled by something invisible, and it began to jump with code that no one could understand. F***CK. While playing games, he could even plant a virus in the opponent. Let me ask you, how did you do it? I was only focused on Big Spade's ultimate move. Gosh. I request the officials to give me a super slow replay. It's useless to watch the replay. It's a technical problem to plant a virus in a game. My big spade's handsomeness surpasses the heavens. The commentators finally thawed. That was because Fu Jiu's right hand moved the mouse, and her right hand quickly switched to another account. She logged back into the ID that made countless people who really liked esports but couldn't get ahead through the system. Spade Z. Just like what the young man said, I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. Not only was Spade Z on the screen, but there was also data showing that someone had changed the password of the ID Spade Z 2 days ago. Chapter 231. Fu Ximing's face was almost swollen. The shoutcaster, Yun-Hu, had also come from the military courtyard. When he saw this, he couldn't suppress his instincts. He sneered into the microphone. I don't think I need to explain this part. The person who spent money to steal someone's account can leave now that he has been exposed. When the Fu family's team members heard this, not only their expressions, but even their movements were stiff. Out of so many esports competitions, they were the only team that was kicked out by the organizer. Not only that, such a large-scale esports live broadcast must have been watched by all the other teams, which meant that they had lost face all over the country. In the future, not only in Jiang City, but also in other cities, this would be their lifelong shame. The audience in the stadium would not give them face at all. If they only lost, they would get the respect of the loser. But Fu Ximing ignored the rules and thought that he was powerful. Not only did he steal someone else's account, but he also incited the media to impersonate them. The reason why gamers loved esports so much was that they could get fairness in Hero that they couldn't get in real life. In the past, background didn't matter here. As long as you were skilled enough, you could stand out. But in recent years, in the esports circle, there were some people who relied on their good looks to find others to play for them, or they could become famous just because they were rich. This made some people feel discouraged. Fu Ximing's blatant actions had completely touched the bottom line. Many real Spade Z fans were worried about Fu Jiu in front of their computers, afraid that the young man couldn't prove himself. But in the end, the young man not only proved himself. It also proved one thing: as long as you had the ability, you wouldn't be afraid of rumors. Nobody knew when it started, but when people saw the ID of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. They didn't know when it started, but when they saw the ID of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. No one needed to say which team the champion would belong to. The three big words, "He Family Army," dominated the 10 screens in the stadium, with Fu Jiu's beautiful and fair face and the slow-motion playback of her ultimate moves. No matter how many times they watched it, it was still too handsome. In the audience, He Honghua's round face was already covered in tears. She covered her mouth with her hands, afraid that she would cry. She had never told anyone about how she had led her life. Sometimes she was so tired that she wanted to divorce Fu Zhongyi. In this world, there are too many people who will respect you because you have enough money, power and culture. He doesn't care what you did. On the same occasion, she appeared with the three. She was just a village girl. She deserved to be robbed by that man. That third was a fairy who was praised by others, who asked her to not be as good-looking as him, and to have such a figure. He Honghua didn't like money, but she couldn't live without it. What about her Zhou? Once she filed for divorce, the company would lose her. What would happen to her Zhou in the future? She couldn't swallow her anger. He had to earn it back. However, all of her team members had been poached away at the last minute. She had been deserted by her friends and family, and she had been slandered by the public. Everyone wanted to step on her and make her completely bankrupt. He had really been discouraged before. In such a dark night, she had to travel from city to beg for help. She really wanted to cry. Even when the He Family Army appeared, she still thought that she would just treat it as her Zhou's happiness. But he had won. Chapter 232. He Honghua didn't know how to describe her feelings. She just looked at the tall and slender figure on the field with red eyes. In a mother's mind, the greatest happiness for her child was to be recognized. The background music of Hero sounded. All the members of the He Family Army stood up. Every one of them had very bright eyes. We have to admit that sometimes there was a kind of handsomeness that had nothing to do with appearance. It was a kind of aura that emanated from the inside out. 4 people of different heights, wearing the same uniform, stood side by side. The youngster was in the lead, and behind them were rows of glowing computer screens. All the cameras were aimed at one direction, the captain of the He family army, Fu Jiu. Just as some people expected, this youngster was going to be popular. The esports selection contest organized by the Qin group was broadcasted nationwide. It wasn't over yet. Over there were reporters asking questions at the All-Star press conference. The question was from the ever-victorious team that suppressed the Supreme Alliance last year, the Xiangnan team. Almighty Xiao, I don't know if you paid attention to the selection contest organized by the Qin group. The person called Almighty Xiao sat calmly. How can I pay attention when I'm here? Reporter. There's no way to continue this topic. I heard that there's a player called Spade Z over there. He destroyed the whole field as soon as he appeared. The man raised his eyebrows. There's such a thing. It's being broadcasted on all the online platforms. The reporter was already excited when he said this. He wanted to grab some news. After all, everyone knew that Xiangnan and the Supreme Alliance would have a tough battle in the national competition soon. If he could grab some news at this time and use it as a gimmick, it would definitely be a hit. The man just glanced at the reporter and then. Oh. Justin, oh. Tell me what you're feeling right now. The agent standing behind the man couldn't stand it anymore. He smiled like a Maitreya Buddha. Xiao Jing, you can tell me more about your feelings. Feelings? Xiao Jing thought about it seriously and said, please broadcast this kind of esports competition on TV. I don't like the internet. Reporter. You, an esports god, don't like the internet. I heard that Almighty Qin appreciates this Spade Z very much. The reporter saw that Xiao Jing was about to leave, so he had to use his big move. As expected, the man walked back, his face serious. Tell me in detail, how did Qin Mo appreciate this newcomer? Reporter. Xiao De, this is a press conference, not a small talk. You're paying so much attention to Almighty Qin, aren't you secretly in love with him? The people from the other teams saw it too. There were many players from the top 4 in the country. This Spade Z is not bad. Why don't you say that it's because his opponents are too weak? There will always be some loopholes in his attacks. It's just that his opponents didn't notice them. Anyway, we'll meet him in the national competition. Let's show him what really sports is like then. Of course. Regardless of what was going on in the outside world, the golden trophy that symbolized first place was already in Fu Jiu's hands. Regardless of whether they were professional or non-professional, all of the hero fans were watching this scene through the live stream. Chapter 233. In the beginning, some people were wondering why the young man wanted to go there. But when they came back to their senses, they remembered that Almighty Qin was there. What was going on? In the distance, Qin Mo was wearing a pure black uniform. He was standing on 10 steps, and when he saw the young man walking towards him, his long and narrow eyes became more and more enchanting. His expression was still indifferent. Even now, he only raised his eyebrows slightly, full of an aura of abstinence. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. Not only the audience, but even the judges were stunned. Because they never thought that the story would develop like this. What did the young man want to do by walking in front of Almighty Qin like this? In that instant, all the cameras shifted their positions and focused on the two of them. Secretary Liang, who was nervous, was also caught in the frame. He just wanted to pull young Master Jiu over and ask him what he wanted to do by doing this at this time. Didn't he know that there were cameras around? What if someone found out that our boss Qin might be gay? Chen Xiaodong basically had the same idea as Secretary Liang. He still hadn't forgotten why his young master played online games. It was all because of young Master Qin. Now, he was even more certain of this idea. However, neither Fu Jiu nor Qin Mo cared about other people's opinions. The two of them were originally luminous, and when they walked together, the brilliance would be multiplied by 10 times. The young man had a slight smile on his face. He was handsome and attractive, and even through the screen, one could feel his youthful aura. His side profile was so clean that even the tiny hairs could be seen on the camera. What was different from the young man was the noble and domineering aura that Almighty Qin exuded. Two people. One on the stage. The other below. Standing on the steps in the middle. Suddenly, it was as if all the lights ran into the young man's eyes, like a broken diamond, shining beautifully. Because he was too handsome. When such a scene appeared on the screen in the form of a picture, people only felt that they were looking at a beautiful comic script. Fu Jiu was still walking forward with a smile. The judges were wondering if Boss Qin would give the young man a look and let him experience it himself. He didn't expect this. Just as Fu Jiu reached the last step, Qin Mo suddenly reached out his hand and pulled the youngster up. Fu Jiu didn't hesitate. She took the force and leaned forward to smile. Her thin lips moved close to Qin Mo's left ear, and her voice was very melodious. Brother Mo, you don't have to come down from the altar. I can just come up. How can I be worthy of you if I don't have the ability to wipe out the entire team? What he said made people think too much. Chen Xiaodong covered his eyes when he saw the scene. Young master, what exactly do you want? You're flirting with Almighty Qin in front of the entire nation. Shui Yaoyao's heart trembled. She looked to her left, then to her right. The audience's jaws dropped. Your Highness Zhou, did you really not see the frown on Almighty Qin's face when you got close to his ear? The two commentators were also speechless. They had never seen their captain being flirted with like this before. Chapter 234. But this was exactly the kind of look that wanted to strangle the other person, but had a hint of indulgence and gentleness in his eyes. However, it was recorded by the camera. Apart from the audience present, there were also those Qin Mo fans watching the live broadcast. They were completely blown away. When had Almighty Qin ever smiled like this? So charming. The network that hadn't been paralyzed at any time just now had reached its limit. As Qin Mo curled his thin lips, he raised his hand, grabbed the young man's collar, and pulled him in front of him. The screen blurred. In an instant, the comments section exploded. What's going on? It seems like the platform crashed. F***CK, where's the technology? Where's the platform technology? I want to see the follow-up. What was my Almighty Qin doing just now? What was he doing? What was he doing? Only the people who saw it at the scene knew. He grabbed the young man with one hand, and his smile was cold and seductive. I'll teach you a lesson later. Fu Jiu was innocent. Why did she have to be taught a lesson? This kind of conversation was really, so loving. There were many fujoshis at the scene, especially the girls who liked to play games, and they liked to match their Almighty with them. But they had never thought of matching Almighty Qin with anyone. After all, a person like Almighty Qin was like a flower on a high mountain, to be watched from afar and not to be messed with. The most important thing was that Almighty Qin was straight. The kind of straight as a pencil. No one dared to match him with anyone, for fear of being thrown into the cold palace by him. Even the esports reports only dared to say which team's female player Almighty Qin had met, and they didn't dare to directly say that they were friends, etc. Not to mention that there was a guy next to Almighty Qin. But now, seeing the young man standing in front of him, and Almighty Chin not forgetting to tidy his hair while teaching him a lesson. All the Fujoshi's hearts popped out from seeing this scene. They were so compatible. They were a perfect match. Just when the excited audience took out their mobile phones to take pictures of the two of them, Chen Xiaobei's expression changed. The platform was still flooding with comments. Rolling around, acting cute, hurry up and give us a follow-up. How to give them a follow-up? The technical staff was about to cry. The media, on the other hand, was overjoyed. They kept snapping photos from all angles and poses. Every single photo could be used as a page and could even be privately circulated. Am I the only one who noticed that my big spade calls Almighty Chin brother Mo? Ah. In other words, the two of them have already met before. That's possible. That's why Almighty Chin came down just now, because he couldn't stand my big spade being bullied. No, you can't think like that. Almighty Chin is straight. Almighty Chin is still straight. Chapter 235. But even without Qin Xiaodong's words, the atmosphere between Qin Mo and Fu Jiu was a little too intimate. It was rare to see Qin Mo treat someone like this. No one knew what the young man said to him with a smile. Almighty Chin reached out and pulled the zipper of the young man's uniform up to his head, taking care of the young man as if he was taking care of his younger brother. Fu Jiu looked down at Almighty Chin's hand, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her clean side profile was so handsome that it made people want to scream. Two equally outstanding people standing together was really pleasing to the eye, not to mention their actions were so ambiguous. Many fangirls already knew that from today onwards, they would have another pair of CP fans, and they couldn't be happier. But those who played esports knew that it was the mutual admiration between two masters. No one could predict the future of the young man. Although the Supreme Alliance was the king of Jiang City, they hadn't won the national championship for 3 years in a row. Although Almighty Chin was known as the most valuable esports player, he was a single player. The final victory of the national competition was determined by team combat. Moreover, the level of the professional teams in the country wasn't like today's, where they could be destroyed by one person. But no one could deny that the Supreme Alliance, which had Almighty Chin and had absorbed Spade Z, was very strong. No one knew. Everything in the future was unknown. When Fu Jiu led the He family army and stood in the Supreme Alliance, Feng Shang was the most excited other than Shui Yaoyao. He looked at Feng Yi, who was walking towards him, and his eyes were red. He took the honor from his brother's hands, and his back was straight. Feng Yi had so many things to say to his brother, but in the end, this manager, who could make all esports players famous, just walked past him and went to the next player. Because Feng Yi was very clear that this honor should be given to Feng Shang cleanly. Even if it was mentioned in the esports circle one day. No one would say, look, he became famous because of his brother. In fact, he is just a stutterer. The person who chased after his pants when he was young had grown up. At this moment, Feng Yi finally believed that even without his protection, his brother could still stand out from the crowd. Fu Jiu was, of course, the last speaker. Under the bright lights, the youngster held the glittering gold trophy in his hand and glanced at the other three standing beside him. Facing the camera, he suddenly smiled. I want to give this trophy to my mother. Because of me, she has broken her heart too many times. Because of her poor background, she was ridiculed by others. She moved from city to negotiate with sponsors. Finally, she managed to preserve the company's qualifications and form a team. That's why we can come here. So I want to give this trophy to her mother.